Interpellation numéro 18.
Number 18.
Thank you, Speaker. Colleagues, I seem to often draw the short straw, always standing between you and your dinner. But I promise once again to whet your appetite with information and ideas before you get on to your well-earned rest. This is an inquiry about international students in Canada. It is a story about people, about their hopes and dreams, their aspirations, but it is also a story about money and greed. It is a story about severe unintended consequences and disappointment. So it is, when I think about it, it has all elements of the good, bad, and ugly wrapped up in it. And I want to start on a positive. I don't want to start on a positive note, sorry. I'm going to start with the bad, which started to come to light in 2021 through media stories that were documenting the abuse of international students, for example, and we read about it in Maclean's and the CBC and the Toronto Star, 8 students crammed into one apartment where even the corridor to the apartment was rentable space, about harassment by landlords, about disappointed students who realized that they had been sold a false basket of goods, and the truly ugly side of it, which was trafficking and even suicides. Senators Wu and former Senator Marwa, Senator Youssef and myself, we pooled our concerns and our resources to investigate these further. And last fall, exactly almost on the date when the international student bubble bursted, we made our report and our recommendations public. And I have waited to speak to this for almost a year because so many changes have been announced, and any thoughtful discussion on international foreign students must take these changes into account. But it is important to go back to the basics, and the basics are pretty straightforward for me. Canada aims to provide a world-class education to students, both domestic and international. And if some international students stay, then that's terrific for Canada. And if some international students choose to leave, that's also terrific for Canada because they become ambassadors for our country. Somewhere along this way, however, we lost our way. As a result, our world-class universities and colleges, who we rely on to provide education to our children, my grandchildren now, domestic students in the first line, have become over-reliant on an external source of funding over which they have no control, namely fees derived from international students. In other words, at stake is not only how we treat international students, but also the future of Canadian children and, in fact, the future of our country. How did this happen? And I'm going to take you back to 2011. At that time, we lagged behind the UK, the US, and Australia in attracting international students. And it became an aspiration of our country to catch up. And so we launched an international education strategy to enhance Canada's global competitiveness. Our goal was to double the number of international students from 240,000 in 2011 to over 450,000 by 2022. In fact, we surpassed this target by 2017 and significantly exceeded it by 2022. Success, we could claim. Canada now hosts close to 1 million international students who contribute over $22 billion to our economy and support more than 218,000 jobs, revitalizing, in particular, smaller communities. That is the good part of the story. In the best scenario, international students contribute to the financial base of our system. They fill labor market needs, they transition to permanent residence, and then become citizens. In 2022, 95,000 international students became permanent residents, a significant rise from the 19,000 in 2015. My nephew pursued this path. He came to study at University of Toronto, did an undergrad in business. He graduated. He found a job at HSBC, transitioned to CIBC, and somewhere along the line, he became a permanent resident and has now put in an application for citizenship. And I think, what more could a country want? Students like my nephew, who have worked here, who speak the language, one of our official languages, whose credentials are accepted, are the literal low-hanging fruit for us. However, success has its costs. There are now integrity challenges, housing challenges, unmet expectations, and reports of unhealthy relationships between public colleges and private colleges, which appear to be a sham and a scam. At the core of these challenges is a human being. It's the student. Many live in overcrowded conditions, face landlord abuse, and struggle with false promises of work opportunities and permanent residency. Despite these challenges, most want to stay. I live in a part of Toronto, and I love taking the subway because it brings me face to face with people. And at a certain subway stop, a huge crowd of international students get in. They look like me. They're clearly from India. And because I speak their language, I engage with them. And I say to them, are you here to study and to stay? Have you heard about the new rules? And they say to me, we've heard about them, we're worried about them, but under no conditions can I leave, because it would be such a loss of face for me and for my family. And we've gotten into this mess. And I think it's normal when we get into a mess that we look over our shoulder and find someone to blame. But I think this is frankly unproductive. Everyone shares in this mess. The federal government, the provincial government, territorial governments, educational consultants, international students themselves, because some of them use it as a backdoor entry, landlords, employers, and of course, our designated learning institutions, colleges and universities. And because at the heart of this is one inescapable truth, and it is this: we have collectively and deliberately beggared our colleges and universities, and the numbers bear me out. Provincial funding for post-secondary educational institutions has plummeted from 28.2% to 21.5% in 11 years. At the national level, funding for post-secondary educational institutions has remained stagnant for the last 15 years. Provincial governments have either frozen domestic student fees or have been extremely stingy with transfers to educational institutions. In Ontario, it is particularly bad. Provincial funding per full-time domestic public college student was the lowest in 2018-2019. And in order to make up for this lost revenue, on the one hand, they've frozen domestic fees. On the other hand, they're cutting back on grants. I can't actually blame colleges and universities for looking for a source of revenue, and so they reach international students. And international students are being used as their ATM. Another proof point is the widening fee gap between domestic fees, which are frozen, and international fees, which can go up as the institute or as the province decrees. International students' fees now constitute, in my province, 69% of the base of funding for universities and colleges. If this is not dependency, I don't quite know what is. Whilst I understand that post-secondary institutions have had to rely increasingly on foreign student fees to cover their base, our report takes issue with the focus on revenue over quality education. partnerships between public and private career colleges are used as a revenue-generating tactic, very often compromising quality. And it works like this. There is a non-urban college or university in a part of Canada where it is hard to attract international foreign students, which are the only source of revenue that universities and colleges can grab to. So they partner with a private college in a place like Toronto or Vancouver or Montreal, and they share the revenue between them. The student actually never ever goes to the host college, stays in an urban center, is promised that through this partnership, they will be able to work and gain permanent residencies. The problem is that these arrangements surpass enrollment limits and lack compliance and quality assurance audits. I was in Chandigarh last year, which is in Punjab. It is the single largest visa-producing facility in all the world of applicants who come to Canada. And I went to visit the consul general to examine this phenomena. Early in the morning, there was a snake line of people waiting around the plaza where our consul was located. And I spoke to them. And again, because I look like them and speak their language, they opened up to me. And all of them said they wanted to come to Canada. They wanted to stay in Canada. They were not really clear about what they were going to study. No. They were not really clear about what college they were applying to. But they were clear that they were going to use all their resources, and possibly those of their families, to get here. It was also very clear to me that they were being advised by educational consultants. And the city was filled with advertisements of, I will help you come to Canada, I will help you pass your exam, I will help you get your visa, etc., etc. And almost everybody, in fact, everybody I spoke to used a consultant. And to some extent, I think it's a matter of culture. The people in the Punjab, and I'm one of them, so I can state this, as a matter of culture, we tend to use consultants. And it's hard to beat culture. And the consultants provide some bona fide services to the students, such as prepping for ESL tests or obtaining the letter of admission, etc., etc. And they are compensated. They charge almost no fees to the student, and this should be a giveaway. Instead, they are paid on a commission basis by Canadian colleges and universities, and sometimes these commissions are as high as 15 to 30%. And this is a very sweet deal all around. The Canadian post-secondary institutions can attract students but at arm's length. The consultant, because they get a pretty sweet commission, it's just not a sweet deal for the international student, who is often referred by the consultants to a course of study or an institution that is not made out to be what it is. A CBC article in March highlighted a particular case where an Indian student was misled by an agent who enrolled them in a private college, falsely assured them of an easy transfer to a public institution, and this situation revealed significant ethical issues. There is minimal incentive and insufficient oversight by Canadian governments to ensure that this kind of fraud is not perpetrated. There are also ghost consultants, by the way, who pose as immigration consultants, providing services and charging fees for absolutely nothing. And the entry of private colleges into this mix is problematic. And I want to be careful here, because private colleges have called me, and some of them have told me, and they do provide bona fide services, but not all. They don't receive public funding and operate privately, leading to minimal oversight on class sizes, educational quality, and financial stability. A January 2023 article in Maclean's highlighted issues with a Quebec-based private college that had closed suddenly in 2022, leaving international students in a very difficult situation. Since we made our report public, certain corrective measures have been taken. Global Affairs Canada has sought input for a new international education strategy, including better regulation of educational agents. And this might offer us clues for going forward. Seriously? I'm done. Colleagues, I will move.
But I would need leave from your colleagues if you want some extra time. Is leave granted?
That's generous of you. We need to get back to the basics. We need to stop over-promising international students that they can come, work, and stay. Go to the IRCC website. It says, come to Canada, learn, work, stay. That is a false promise. We should not be doing that. We should be tabling numbers every year with our annual immigration plan as to how many international students we plan to land, just as we put out a plan for grandparents, etc. And there are many other things we can do. But I believe that we need to address the root problem. And this is predictable, sustained funding for Canadian colleges and universities so that they are able to provide a quality education in the first line to domestic students. The reliance on international fees for financial stability is risky. Look at the political situation between India and Canada. I can project quite firmly that the number of students from India will fall, and India makes up 40% of the international student cohort. What are universities and colleges going to do? We need to have a serious, grown-up, national conversation about restoring financial stability to post-secondary education system. And it's not a conversation about power and control, about credit or blame. It's about the future of our country. If we don't do this, if we lose sight of the fundamentals, we will shortchange our entire future. So, colleagues, I leave you with this thought. Our study started out by focusing on international students, but I have come to the conclusion that international students are merely a symptom of a severe root cause, and if we don't go back to the root cause, I promise you the tail will wag the dog. Thank you.